Hey YouTube, it is League Turnover today, and there are two Great League options. So there's Open Great League, which we'll cover this afternoon, and there is Fantasy Cup. So Fantasy Cup is a Great League with Dragon, Steel, and Fairy types. So the good news is that this league has actually been on before. It was actually mostly on in the Ultra League, and then a couple seasons ago, it was on in the Great League. So we actually have teams for this cup. But before we go over those teams, let's look at some rankings. So, three typings: Steel, Fairy, what did I say the third was? Dragon. Dragon, Steel, Fairy. So my initial thought was that Steel should dominate, right? Because Steel resists Dragon and Steel resists Fairy. So you would think that Steel would dominate. And there are a good amount of Steels on this front page, right? So there's Registeel at 2, Stunfisk at 4, Excadrill at 6, Empoleon at 5, I actually just missed. Lucarios have Steel at 8. The Shadow Excadrill at 9. Shadow again at Reggie. Skarmory at 14 and 16. Heatran, if you have one now, is at 15. Empoleon again. And Sandslash at 19. And Escav at 20. Right? So how many is that out of the top? What is not in the top 20 that is Steel? So that was like 16, 15, 16 that are Steel. And again, should not be surprising, right? When you resist Fairy and you resist Dragon, you have a huge advantage. So what puts like one Steel ahead of the other? It's just stuff that we normally cover. It's stat product, it's moveset, it's bulk, it's stuff like that. So Reggie, with the two nukes of Focus Blast and Zap Cannon near the top, Galarian Stunfisk was the OG Steel. Well, no, Skarmory was the OG Steel, but Stunfisk was the OG Registeel. So if you don't have Reggie, Stunfisk is good to go. You're going to see an ABB Steel team that I use with Stunfisk as the safe swap. I think is pretty strong. You can use Reggie as a safe swap as well. Excadrill was the other Steel. I think Excadrill is pretty sneaky in this meta, given how spammy it is and how much coverage it has. You're a Steel, but you dominate the Steels because you have a very, very quick Mud Shot to Drill Run combo. So being able to drill and everything, and then you have some like Rock Slide for either bait moves or potential. I know Skarmory's here, so like neutral on Skarmory at least. So Excadrill is a nice pick. Empoleon probably wasn't on as many teams a couple seasons ago when this was run, but I guess it will be on more teams now because of that Steel Wing. Again, Steel Wing doesn't do much against other Steels, but obviously it will dominate Fairies. And now with the other meta being Dragon, you will no longer have Water being resisted by Dragon. You'll have Steel, which will depend on the Dragon. So like, because I'm looking at Turtonator at 11 will still resist, but perhaps others won't. So Steel Wing Hydro Cannon combo should be very strong in this. Lucario, there's not going to be many counter users in this, right? Very, very few counter users are Fairy, Steel, or Dragon. So having a Steel counter user, Escav being the other, being able to hit super effective against all those Steels when Steel should run this meta is very, very strong. Skarmory, same sort of thing, got buffed. Probably didn't see a ton of it before. It should be a good answer to like most of these Steels, Dragons, and Fairies. I guess why it maybe falls probably below the others is that while the others have moves for other Steels, you don't have a move for the Steels. Brave Bird and Skytack are both resisted. So if you're looking for actual coverage from a Steel, like Registeel, Empoleon, Excadrill, all these other Steels that I mentioned actually have moves that can actually hit against other Steels, whereas Skarmory does not. So maybe not as strong despite its ranking in this meta. Heatran is going to be an interesting one. As a Steel Fire hitting super effective against the Steels, and Steel Fire double resisting the Fairies, like a Charm user. So could be interesting from that. We're going to get to the Fairies in a second, noting that 2 of them do not run Charm on the... Actually, 3 of them don't run Charm. So we'll keep that in mind when we're looking at the Steels. And then Sandslash and Escav. So Sandslash, same thing, just a Steel that gives you some coverage against other Steels with Drill Run. And then Escav as basically one of your only other counter users in this meta. So the fairies, there's 3 on the front here that I'm looking at: Azumarill, Tapu Fini, and Weezing. Azumarill and Tapu Fini really high on the list. And why is that? So one is some of these. So first of all, they're not running Charm. So at least they have play against other steals, right? And some of these steals are half ground. Excadrill, Stunfisk. So they take Super Effector from water. So right off the bat, you're not only have moves for steals, you have moves for some of the top meta Pokemon that will hit super effective. In addition, you're still fairy, so you're resisting dragon type moves, right? So having moves for steel while also resisting dragon, and then Azumarill is just so bulky. Notice that it's running Play Rough, Hydro Pump. You kind of need Hydro Pump because of all the steals in this meta. So then your second question is Ice Beam versus Play Rough. They're recommending Play Rough because of the dragon. Well, dragon would also take Super Effector from ice. I guess it depends what you want to run. I think Hydro is a must, right? Because you need it for the other steals. Second move, Play Rough, Ice Beam. You can just depend on what you want. And then Nature's Madness, Tapu Fini with that new move buff dominate there. Galarian Weezing is the other fairy. Not running Charm. Fairy Winds, fast charging, Overheat, and Sludge. Overheat is basically just for your steals. It's just for everything except for dragons. Dragons would resist Overheat, but they're running Sludge. I think they're purely running Sludge as a bait move. I would recommend you probably run maybe Play Rough. I don't know. I think I would want something more for the dragons, and as opposed to Sludge if Overheat is going to be resisted. But with Fairy Wind, you could potentially Fairy Wind Sludge combo, and it's not like dragons are going to do much against you unless they're like Flygon, which is half ground here, which we'll get to in a second. So there's that. And now the dragons. There's only 2 on this list, 3 on this list: Giratina, Turtonator, and Flygon. So Giratina gets by because it's a dragon with no dragon moves, right? It is playing the pure ghost move, very attack heavy in the Great League. Shadow Claw, one of the best fast moves in the game, and then Shadow Ball will, I don't want to say nuke everything here, but it's pretty attack heavy in the Great League. It's going to do a lot of damage. Turtonator is your half fire dragon, which makes it really sneaky in the meta that is dominated by steals to have a fire type Pokemon. So fire type Pokemon neutralizes the fairy weakness because fire will resist fairy and dragon will take super effective. So you're only neutral against fairies, hit super effective against the steals. Obviously you need to watch out for, if you're going to use Turtonator, you have to watch out for Azumarill, Tapu Fini, because you have no moves for them. So you need to build a team around it that can deal with those 2. And then Flygon is a nice answer because same thing. It is half ground, half dragon, but you're playing more as your ground here. Mudshot, Dragon Claw, Scorching Sands. So you still have a dragon type move, Dragon Claw, for other dragons, but the Mudshot, Scorching Sands is probably what you're going to use for almost everything else in this meta. So those are the teams. Those aren't the teams. Those are the Pokemon. So let's look at some teams that have been used in the past here. So you're going to see that, again, when you're in a meta with 3 typings, it's very likely that you're only going to see like 10 to 12 Pokemon. So Azumarill is going to be on like 3 or 4 of these top teams here because it is truly that strong. As you see, Ice Beam, Play Rough here. Again, I would probably go Hydro, but Sandslash, Azumarill, Togetic, Double Fairy. So use Azumarill. I think you probably... Do you need to save swap? I'm trying to figure out if you need to save swap. Because, yeah, I think you're double weak to poison in the back. So you might... I don't know if there's a lot of sneaky poison users. Oh, that's why. Sorry. Why are you using Sludge on Weezing? Because you're using Sludge for all the fairies. So I guess there's not going to be a ton of Sludge, but there's going to be some Steel, maybe 1 or 2 Sludge. So maybe you try and draw out that with the Azumarill and then wall it with Sandslash, and then Togetic runs free. Um, I would probably, again, run Hydro Pump. If I'm running Azumarill as a safe swap and you're going to get hit with a Reggie or something, you really need Hydro Pump for the Reggie. And I think you're trying to draw out that steal so that your Togetic does not need to see it in the back. Speaking about Turtonator, right? So there it is. You have the Overheat. This one ran Dragon Pulse. You have nothing for Azumarill or Tapu Fini, so you run Azumarill. And then Escav, right? So you got a Steal, a counter user, so your counter user will deal with most of the steals. That's right. I like Azumarill can get by with no player off here because you have an Incinerate user and a counter user for the steals, so you don't need Azumarill to have Hydro Pump if you're running like 2 answers to steals. I like Escav in this meta. I think it's going to be kind of sneaky strong. Not a ton of flyers, which gives it the... I mean, there's still Skarmory, but again, Skarmory has its limitations in this meta, so not a lot of flyers in this meta. Being able to hit super effective counter draw runs against steals and also wall fairy is a pretty good combo in this meta. Neutral against dragons in most parts, so I think Escav in the rank 20, I think it's probably better than that. Weak to fire, so you got a Azumarill Turtonator to deal with that. A little problems against flying, which I think is where Azumarill, again, I don't think there's really, like, besides Skarmory, any real flyers. Togetic, I guess, in this meta. Oh, we're really going to see Azumarill on like 7 teams here, aren't we? So I just copied all the teams that I showcased before. So it's Azumarill, Lucario, and Magnezone. ABB Steel, you are drawing out potentially a fighter, Escav, Lucario, or something that can just deal with, I think Lucario, like ground, like a Flygon. You're trying to draw that out with Lucario. You're then going to punish it with Azumarill, and then you're going to have your Magnezone roam free. So Lucario's your safe swap. Try to draw out the fighter. Try and draw out the ground type Pokemon, and then have Azumarill deal with those, and then Magnezone roams free. This is 4 for 4. Oh boy. Okay. 4 for 4. This is the one that I was talking about. Stunfisk, Excadrill, same exact idea as the previous team. Stunfisk is your safe swap. Try and draw out a fighter. Try and draw out a water. Try and draw out a ground. Azumarill will beat them. Excadrill roams free in the back. So very simple ABB style team. They even have the same typing, so it is a true ABB style team. Togedemaru, this is definitely mine. So Togedemaru, I like because you wall steal, you wall fairies, you wall dragons. I mean, you're not going to have anything to throw at dragons either because you're electric, but and then there's Empoleons, there's, I don't know how many Skarmories, but there's Azumarils, there's Tapu Finis, so electric could be kind of a sneaky play in this meta, so I like that. And then Flygon to deal with some of the things you can't hit on anything like dragons. So I couldn't find a right third. Just looking at this team right now, I would probably find a third that could deal with dragons, because you have not, I mean, you wall dragons to a certain extent, but wild charge is resisted, and then Flygon, if they have like a dragon breath or something, you're gonna get outpaced there, like just out fast moved there. Perhaps an Azumarill. Oh my god. Okay. Azumarill. Turtonator. So this is ABB with your double water fairies, Azumarill Tapu. There's your player of Hydro, because I'm assuming you're using that as a safe swap. So try and draw out a Sludge. Try and draw out an Electric, Magnezone, Togedemaru. Try and draw out potentially a Steel. And then with Azumarill, Turtonator, we'll deal with that. And then Tapu in the back, ABB. So I was looking at the rankings, and I was like, is there any Pokemon? And I even used Azumarill here. My goodness. Okay. I was looking at the rankings. I was like, is there any Pokemon that really wasn't around before that may be around now? Giratina Origin is kind of newer. So I don't have one because you need to like trade with someone to get it. Should have maybe done that in New York. But Giratina, as you can see by the X's on the screen there, lots of good matchups. Again, if you go down to like Dragonite, Dragonair, who have the Dragon Breath damage, then they're going to beat you. But man, there's a lot of good wins here. So where's your problems going to be? Some fairies, some dragons. So to deal with the fairies and dragons, I put in Registeel, and then I was looking for a third. And of course, PVPoke recommends the #1 ranked Pokemon in this meta, Azumarill. So could you theoretically go triple Azumarill counters in this meta? Potentially. Let me see. We're just going off script here, as if I have a script. Let's be serious. We do not have a script. But let's just take a look at if Azumarill is truly going to be on every single team. Can I go triple Azumarill counters in the Fantasy Cup? And it's tricky, but it looks like it's doable. The problem is they're all, well, you have Galarian Weezing that's on here too with the Fairy Wind Sludge. So your top counters to for meta, like Togedemaru should be on here, but it's not one of the top listed metas, so it's not on this list. But Magnezone is the #1. Ferrothorn is on here as the Steel Grass, and then Empoleon, Registeel, Weezing, and even a Sandslash. And Tapu Fini actually too. That's maybe bait dependent with, we'll see about that one. So could you put a team together that could potentially make sense here? Maybe go like Weezing, Empoleon, Registeel, double Steel in the back with the Fairy on the lead. Try and draw out a fighter, and that would make you triple weak to ground. So it's a little tricky there. How many ground Pokemon are there? Not a ton. There's some Pokemon with ground type moves like Drill Run. So that'd be a little risky to run something like that. But you can do something like that. If you're truly like seeing Azumarill like 4 to 5 matchups, this is what I always say. I don't mind losing to a Pokemon. I don't mind being triple weak to a Pokemon if I'm not seeing that Pokemon much. I would much rather, if I'm seeing Azumarill 4 to 5 teams, either 3 or 4 to 5 teams, I can build a triple like anti-Azumarill team, even if that team is extremely weak to one other Pokemon, right? I'd rather just like focus on hunting the Pokemon that everyone's using as opposed to like building for something that would destroy me, but I might not see, if that makes sense. So that is it. Like I said, Great League is also on, so we'll do some top teams of that this afternoon. Let me know in the comments below if you are playing this league, if you played it before, what Pokemon you like for this meta, what teams you like for this meta. And that is it. So appreciate you watching. Hit the subscribe button if you are new to the channel, and we will see you guys in the next one.